More, I'm joined by journalist ANTONY. He reported from East Jerusalem for 4 years and wrote a book entitled The Palestine Laboratory. He's speaking with me from Sydney, Australia. Good to see you, Anthony. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz had a lengthy report this week on how high-tech Israeli weapons are essentially being tested in Gaza and how Israel's arms industry is booming. And before this conflict, you wrote a book that dealt with this very issue, the Palestine Laboratory. What role are these weapons playing in Gaza today?
Hugely. I mean, one of the important things that people often don't realise is that what Israel's been doing for years, long before October 7, but certainly since, is often battle testing weapons in the field. So since October 7, they've been testing what they call AI-enabled warfare, which allegedly is pinpoint targeting, but in fact, according to sources that I've spoken to and others, in fact, there was a quote recently, it's a mass assassination campaign of huge amounts of civilians in Gaza. The aim was to kill more, not less. Suicide drones. And this is both international companies and Israeli companies. And when these weapons are being tested and used in the field, they are filmed often for social media, and then they're sold internationally. So what you will imagine in the coming months and years is other nations will be interested in buying some of that technology for their own conflicts. That's essentially what the laboratory means.
And it's not just weapons per se, is it? It's surveillance technology as well.
Hugely. You know, one of the things that's been known for a number of years is, of course, many viewers will have heard of Pegasus, which is a phone hacking tool, essentially, that's been found on huge amounts of mobile phones around the world, made by the Israeli company NSO Group. But there are huge amounts of other examples. And what Israel's been doing for years, it uses the occupied territories, the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem, as a lab. Because what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing 24/7, this is long before October 7, is monitoring everything that goes in and out of the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. Those tools and technologies which they use, biometric tools, facial recognition technology, drones, a range of other technologies, are then sold globally and promoted as battle tested. I have huge amounts of examples in the book that show that. So ultimately, what a lot of countries are wanting to do in their own conflicts and their own issues with minorities is to use Israeli repressive technology. But briefly, it's not just that, it's also the idea of getting away with it. You know, Israel's not just selling the concept of the weapons and how they're used in the field, they're also selling the idea of a nation like Israel, which has essentially had an occupation the longest in modern times, without any kind of repercussions whatsoever.
The counter-argument, of course, is Israel, particularly after October 7, is defending itself from terror attacks and terrorists, which October 7 undoubtedly was, trying to stop a repeat, eliminating an existential threat and so on, and will use what is at its disposal to do that.
Well, that's the argument that Israel makes, but there's a few points in to refute that. One, no one seriously believes, including virtually international lawyers, genocide experts. Some viewers will be aware that South Africa has put forward to the International Court of Justice a genocide charge, which will be heard in the coming week or so, that alleges Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Israel was attacked on October 7. There's no doubt about that. Hamas committed abuses. No one could deny that who's rational. But that doesn't therefore justify everything Israel has done. And in fact, I would argue, and I say this as someone Jewish myself, what Israel is doing in Gaza is making Israelis and Jews and everyone more unsafe around the world. Indiscriminate killing of civilians. 25, 30,000 Palestinians killed, the vast majority of whom are civilians in the last 3 months. No one seriously claims that they're all Hamas. Of course, they're not. And there's no serious indication, by the way, that Hamas is failing. In fact, in many ways, they're still standing and still fighting. So at what point does Israel transition to something which is far more rational? And I fear, because there's no international pressure to do so, this current phase will continue for far too long.
And to that point, Israel is talking about what it says should come after this war in terms of governance and security in Gaza. But there are a lot of analysts, and I've spoken to several of them, who say the level of damage and the type of targets being hit show that at least some in government want the Strip to be unlivable, and the UN saying that pretty much again today. And there are people in government, of course, who want Palestinians in Gaza to leave for third nations. What's your read on that?
I mean, leave is a kind way. I mean, they're essentially key Israeli ministers, not just the far right, not just Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who are far right fanatics, but Netanyahu, many other key Israeli leaders. And also, to be clear, there was a poll 2 weeks ago amongst the Israeli Jewish public that found a vast majority of them supported the idea of so-called voluntary migration, namely finding other places for Palestinians in Gaza to go. And Israel's currently talking, from what I understand, to places like Congo and elsewhere. Now, those nations won't take huge amounts of people, but maybe 10,000 there, 10,000 here. This is no solution. But as you say, Michael, Gaza is being deliberately made unlivable. And at the end of it, the response or the result is either two things. One, endless 10 cities, which is no solution to anything, or Palestinians almost being forced to live somewhere else, either in neighbouring states or beyond. So it's a catastrophe, which, by the way, is not making Israelis safer. It's actually making them more unsafe in the long run.
Antony Loewenstein, author of the Palestine Laboratory. Appreciate you making the time, Antony. Thanks.
Thank you.